Hello, everyone. My name is Harry Baldock, editor here at Total Telecom. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Phil Kendal, Executive Director at Strategy Analytics. Phil, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Harry. Yes, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So, as we come to the end of 2020, I thought it would be really great if we could talk a little bit about one of the most advanced 5G markets in the world right now, South Korea. And I guess my first question is actually related to the fact that I've just called it one of the most advanced markets in the world. Do you think that's a kind of a fitting title, Phil?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot happening in South Korea that sets it out from other countries globally, from a 5G perspective. The network quality is really there compared to a lot of other countries we see. So we've probably had sort of 90% population coverage for the best part of a year now from all three operators, and that's coverage of sort of high quality, fast 5G. So the sort of the C-band deployments delivering 400, 500 megabits per second. So really good quality service rather than sort of some of the European operators have switched a little bit to sort of dynamic spectrum sharing in lower bands. So getting the 5G coverage, but maybe more in the 100, 200 megabit per second range. So I think in terms of a high quality, advanced, widely deployed 5G network, they're certainly up there as a leading country. And really seeing sort of quite impressive adoption levels. I mean, we are looking at around 1 in 5 smartphone users in South Korea actively using and paying for 5G services. In most sort of Western markets, you're still in the sort of 2, 3, 4% range, and it's only really been the last sort of 2 months probably where 5G momentum has really started to build outside of sort of South Korea and a couple of other countries. I mean, the only other market I might point to would be China, which has seen sort of again sort of pretty rapid adoption adoption of sort of 5G plans. There's a little bit of an issue there. There's still some people who have upgraded from 4G plans and don't actually have a 5G phone, but their operator has just kind of told them, "Do you want more data for less money?" And they've happily upgraded without actively being on 5G. But again, it's still, even if you just look at people with 5G phones in China, it's still a relatively strong market. But I would certainly put sort of South Korea as a sort of a step ahead of any other country at this stage in the market.
So why do you think that is? Is that a matter of population density in all of these kind of really big cities, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think, I mean, some of those reasons that make it stand out are helping sort of drive the market in terms of adoption. So certainly the focus on getting that high quality sort of network deployment out there has been key. Potentially a little bit sort of a population density. Yeah, if you're hitting the big cities, you can get up to quite high levels of sort of population coverage. Those people may not necessarily be that bothered if there isn't a 5G signal sort of 20 miles outside of the city limits. So as long as Seoul and Busan or wherever they live and work is covered, then it's a good experience for them. I think there's always a little bit with South Korea of this issue of it is quite a sort of a technology buying market. Consumers do move to new technologies sort of faster than we see in other countries, and a lot of that is sort of championing local vendors, your sort of your Samsungs and your LGs on the smartphone side of the market, sort of users wanting to buy those products and adopt those services. But I think equally a good focus on the operators on building compelling service propositions. I think on the consumer side, we've seen sort of quite good adoption of AR and VR services and probably sort of cloud gaming as well on 5G. So some sort of quite effective bundling of value propositions, sort of packaging those more advanced sort of 5G centric services into the plans. So consumers are seeing sort of reasons to adopt 5G. I think in a lot of other countries, we're still a little bit at the stage of let's build a network and see what consumers will want to do with it, rather than sort of presenting them with, here's these 3 new service experiences that you're gonna love, and that's why you should buy 5G. So I think sort of the Korean operators sort of came out of the gates with a reasonably sort of compelling range of services for consumers to adopt. Then the business market is had a little bit of a boost as well. I mean, that's kind of a longer burn from a 5G point of view, but certainly the sort of the enterprise 5G opportunity is there in Korea. The operators have all been sort of very active in customer co-creation and sort of collaboration with players in the enterprise ecosystem to sort of bring compelling services to market. There's been quite a good focus on using that to get sort of turnkey 5G solutions there. So going into manufacturers with fully rounded sort of 5G smart factory solutions that they can offer, rather than going into a manufacturer and saying, we'll do you a 5G network, you figure out what you want to do with it and you do all the systems integration. So they've been sort of quite good at once they've sort of co-created and collaborated on these products, they've kind of rolled them out quite effectively as almost sort of off-the-shelf products that enterprises can buy.
That leads quite nicely to my next question, which was actually around the lessons operators in other markets can really learn from those in South Korea. You mentioned the new services there. Do you think that's going to be the main area where the operators in other markets can benefit from 5G?
I think so, yeah. I mean, again, it does split sort of consumer business. I mean, on the consumer side of the market, yeah, I mean, speed is nice, but it's maybe going to get sort of 10-20% of consumers ultimately excited. I mean, I had my home broadband upgraded to fibre about a month ago, and it was great for a couple of weeks. It's still great, but I've almost forgotten about that. I'm not running around sort of telling my friends what amazing things you can do with 300 megabits per second. I mean, I guess the novelty wears off relatively quickly. What the Koreans have done quite effectively is, from a service point of view, it's this sort of continuous investment and development of new services. So when you look at something like sort of AR and VR content, there's not a massive library of sort of global content out there. Sort of Hollywood and whoever are not sort of producing reams and reams of compelling content that is sort of already sort of AR and VR enabled. So the operators have, to a certain extent, sort of spent a lot of time and money investing in their own capabilities there, their own sort of content creation capabilities. So sort of volumetric video capture studios and getting in the K-pop stars and the local celebrities to sort of film content. And it's you've got to keep doing that. You can't get 1,000 pieces of content in your catalog and sit back and think you've done the job. You've got to give consumers a reason to keep coming back for the content, keep coming back for new experiences. And I think the operators have been relatively good at doing that, sort of refreshing the content and sort of keeping consumers interested. On the enterprise side of the market, again, I think to a certain extent the Korean operators have been good at tapping into the need or the demand for kind of transformation in businesses that is coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. They've had a little bit of a boost as well from these governments of digital New Deal initiatives. I think there are opportunities in other markets that operators need to look at. What are governments providing funding for in terms of sort of stimulating economies post-pandemic? And certainly in South Korea, the government has put focus on AI and analytics and 5G as sort of key technologies that they see as a need for industry to transform. So there's been this little bit of a boost in the smart factory sector in South Korea because manufacturers are finding there is there is some funding to put in proof of concept propositions that leverage 5G. They're sort of bringing forward sort of some of their longer term, say, flexible working practices, flexible production lines, sort of, and those types of propositions, and they've moved a little bit faster there. So I think when we look at, say, in Europe, some of the EU money sort of set aside, that whatever it is, 750 billion euros for sort of New Deal initiatives, I think it's probably time for operators to not try and sort of cynically carve out a slice of that money for themselves, but sort of see where could we use 5G to sort of support initiatives that play in that. If the money is going to green initiatives, to sort of more flexible, sort of dynamic working practices, all that digital transformation space, certainly 5G has a role to play there. So I think sort of operators can look at those areas. But ultimately, I would say success in the market so far is coming down to sort of collaboration and co-creation. We're looking at operators trying to get in skill sets that they wouldn't necessarily have had even sort of 2 years ago. Sort of as they push further and further into content creation and into enterprise applications, it's not areas where they have a large workforce with sort of strong capabilities there. So sort of finding those ecosystem partners who can help develop compelling consumer content, can help develop sort of rigorous and compelling enterprise applications. I think that's where the major opportunities are over the next sort of year or so.
It's definitely been a time of great change. I think moving forward to 2021, what developments do you expect to see from the South Korean market there? Is it going to be a even stronger lead in 5G, or do you think the European markets and others will be catching up?
I mean, we're expecting strong growth in a lot of markets next year. I mean, certainly, like I say, this last quarter, the availability of low cost sort of 5G smartphones or affordable 5G smartphones has improved dramatically. So the lower end of the market is progressing well. I mean, we're already looking at sort of sub $150 5G smartphones in the Chinese market, sort of a growing range of sub $300 5G smartphones in a lot of other countries. But at the top end, you've now got a sort of Apple playing in 5G and bringing some sort of legitimacy for many consumers. Unless Apple is doing it, they don't necessarily view it as a sort of a credible market. So certainly at both ends of the market, we see potential for real volume there in smartphones. So I think a lot of other countries will catch up. But again, those trends will play out in Korea as well. And I think probably the one weakness in Korea, and the one thing they do need to address next year, is probably attacking the middle part of the market. They very effectively brought the early adopters and the top sort of 20% of consumers into the 5G world with these sort of relatively expensive sort of unlimited data plans. Then they have these sort of more affordable 8-9 gigabyte plans for, again, on 5G, but there's nothing really in the middle of the market. I think they need to sort of start addressing what's compelling, what pricing do we need to do to bring in sort of $50 a month subscribers, rather than sort of focusing all our efforts on those sort of $60, $70, $80 a month subscribers. So I think sort of pricing probably needs to go a little bit more mainstream in the Korean market. I think from an enterprise point of view, it is going to be a relatively slow burn. A lot of these projects are complex. Even with turnkey solutions, you're not seeing every manufacturer or port or construction site sort of rapidly deploying sort of 5G across the sort of the applications they use. We're starting to see some growth in sort of private mobile networks on 5G in Korea. I think sort of LGU Plus just last week launched some millimeter wave trials in that area. So I think that side of the market should get a little bit of a boost. But that's probably where the priorities next year are. I think probably what interests me more in South Korea is maybe a little bit longer term, and the extent to which they can bring in the broader sort of consumer IoT market to 5G. I think that side of the market, sort of smart homes and wearables and other consumer devices, has always been quite a strong one in Korea, and it's doing well on 4G. It'll be interesting to see what 5G can bring to the game there. That kind of that massive IoT, sort of very dense deployment of end user devices, sort of all your smart watches, earbuds, all those kind of consumer products, a lot of sort of smart home opportunities. So I think we'll probably look to South Korea as probably sort of leading in that area. Maybe not next year, it might be more a sort of a 2022 play, but certainly some sort of interesting signs of developments there.
Definitely interesting times ahead. Phil,
Yeah.
thank you very much for your time.
Okay, no, my pleasure.